Hi, how are you? My name is Juan. Welcome back to another video. So today I'm here to do my TBR for April. So I am going to talk about the 6 books that I am planning to read in the month of April 2022. This is a new kind of video for me. I've never really done TBRs, but the reason for that is that I never really used to plan my reading much, and that has kind of changed in the last few months. So I thought you might be interested to know how I come to choose the books I choose, why I pick them up, and what I expect from them. It is a little bit breezy outside, it's a little bit chilly, it's kind of gray. That's why I'm here with my cup of red bush tea. So tasty. So yeah, so for April, I have chosen 6 books. Now, these are 6 books that I feel very strongly I will read, but I'm also open to reading other books. I've chosen 6 books because recently I've been choosing 4 or 5 books for my TBR, but last month in March, or this month rather, depending on when you're watching this, I managed to read a lot more than 4 books, so I'm trying to be a little bit more ambitious, and I've included 6 books for April. I think I've talked about this before, but I do have different categories of books that I want to get to. So every month, I just go, okay, well, I have this category, let's find a book that fits in. I have this other category, let's find a book that fits into that. And that's how I come up with my TBR mostly. So currently, my categories are the following. I'm doing this 12 books for 2022 reading project. I think most of you are already familiar with that, so I'm not going to talk about it a lot. But so every month is a book. And then there's one month in the summer when there are going to be 2 books, but mostly it's just 1 book a month. So that's the first slot right there. So I've already picked out the 12 books, so I just have to check my list and see what book I need to read. That will be the first book I read in a month. Then another category, which I'm actually starting this month, is 1 book, 1 novel from Latin America. Then the third category is 1 novel by the Portuguese writer José Saramago. The fourth category, which I'm also inaugurating this month, is 1 English classic. The fifth category is 1 Proust. So I am reading In Search of Lost Time. That's one of my reading goals for this year, is to finish that novel. That novel has 7 different volumes. You can think about it as 7 different novels, but it is really 1 big novel in 7 different volumes. So I try to read 1 volume a month. But if a particular volume takes me more than 1 month, that's fine. Some volumes are larger than others, and it also depends on what else I'm reading that month. But for sure, whether it's a new one or it's a continuation from the previous month, there's always 1 volume of Proust's In Search of Lost Time in my TBR. And the 6th book, well, I don't have a category for it, so it is whatever I feel like reading. So say I've read something by an author in the previous month or in previous months, and I really liked it, and I want to explore the work of that author, I want to read more books by that author. This is the slot that's reserved for that kind of thing. Or maybe I just read a review, or I heard someone on YouTube or on a podcast talking about a book and I want to read it, but it doesn't fit into that kind of, Saramago, classic, Latin American, etc. categories that I've predetermined for myself. So this is how I fit them in. So we can talk now about the specific books, which I'm sure is what you're here for. So, okay, so the book for the 12 books for 22 project for the month of April is going to be The Blue Flower by Penelope Fitzgerald. So whether you watch the announcement video for the whole project or not, if you're watching this, feel free to join and read along The Blue Flower, because at the end of the month, I shall devote a whole video to reviewing that novel, and I hope you'll watch that and you will let me know what you think about it, okay? So I don't know much about The Blue Flower, and I think that's fine. I'm just really interested in the work of Penelope Fitzgerald, who was this English writer who is very acclaimed, but not that well known. And I think her novels are little jewels. I've read some of them, but a really, really long time ago, so I couldn't even tell you what is special about her writing. So I want to rediscover that, and I'd love to discover that with you guys. In fact, I think I probably read The Blue Flower many years ago, but I don't remember anything about it. So what I know about it from doing research for my reading project is that it's very short and it's very critically acclaimed. Some people say it's her best novel. It is a historical novel. It is based on the life of the real-life German romantic poet Friedrich von Handenberg, who is better known as Novalis. That was his pen name. But I don't think the novel focuses on him as a writer, as a poet. I think the novel rather deals with his early life. So I'm really curious about it, and I really do hope some of you will join me in reading that novel. Next, I have The Bell by Iris Murdoch. This belongs to that category of books where there isn't really a category. I just want to read it because I'm interested in reading it. But let me tell you why I want to read it. So The Bell is one of the earlier novels by Iris Murdoch. And I hadn't read anything by Iris Murdoch. Iris Murdoch, of course, is really famous, very prolific English writer who died quite a few years ago now. But, you know, she wrote for most of the second half of the 20th century. I read The Sea by her in February. That was the book that started my 12 books for 2022 reading project. I just loved it. It was one of the best reading experiences I've had in recent years. It's that good. Of course, I've reviewed The Sea, so I'm going to link to it in case you haven't watched that review. You can watch it even if you haven't read the book, just to see why you should read it. She wrote more than 20 novels. She wrote and published a lot of work, and that's always difficult because when you want to start reading a writer that has written so much, it's really hard to know where you want to begin, what you want to read first. And, you know, I read The Sea because it's really famous. I think it won the Booker Prize. I don't remember that right now, but I think it won the Booker Prize. And then after reading that, I did some research and I asked a lot of people on Twitter, and some people who have read a lot from her pointed me in the direction of different articles or gave me their own personal suggestions. And The Bell seems to be one of her best novels, according to many people I have heard from. So why not? I've chosen The Bell. I don't know much about the novel, okay? And I don't really want to know much about it. All I know is that apparently it is set in some sort of enclosed religious community. I don't know how much religion will play a part in the novel. Of course, Iris Murdoch, as you probably know, was a philosopher. She was a fiction writer. She was a novelist, but she was also a philosopher. I haven't read any of her philosophical work, although from what I've gathered and from reading The Sea, I think a lot of her philosophy seeps into her fiction. So I'm curious to see that religious aspect and how she deals with it. I mean, there didn't seem to be much about that in The Sea, other than one of the main characters in that novel. Well, one of the secondary characters, actually. But one of the main secondary characters, if you know what I mean, was a Buddhist. So I don't know. I'm really curious to read The Bell. Now, as for Latin American literature, I have read quite a bit, and I have read, you know, your Garcia Marquez's and your Mario Vargas Llosa's and all of that. Not that I've read everything they've ever wrote. I want to read more contemporary writers when it comes to Latin American writing, because there are a lot of writers that I keep hearing great things about, but I've never really read them. And one of them is Alejandro Zambra, who's from Chile, and he wrote a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2020, his novel Chilean Poet came out in the original Spanish, but there's now a fresh translation. It came out in English translation, I think, last month or in the last couple of months, so it's available to all of you. I mean, I assume that if you watch my channel, because I make my videos in English, you are able to read in English. I don't know how many of you can read in Spanish, but I assume that all of you can read in English. So Chilean Poet is now available in English. I'm really excited to read it because I've heard really good things about it, but also about Alejandro Zambra as a writer in general. So I'm really excited to read his most recent novel. I think he is a promising writer. That's how people discuss him in general. I mean, when I say people, I mean critics. I've heard really good things about everything he's written before Chilean Poet, so I thought, why not? I'm going to start with his latest novel. If I like the writing, I'm going to explore his other work. I think he's published mostly short stories or short novels. I might end up reading more from him in April if I do well with Chilean Poet. This novel also has such a nice title because Chile, I mean, at least for Spanish speakers, but I think it's a universal thing probably. You know, we think of Chile in many ways, the country of Chile in South America in many ways, and one of them is as a nation of poets. Immediately, even if you're not into poetry, I think most people have heard of Pablo Neruda and also Gabriela Mistral in Spanish. So those two are like huge poets, and they're from Chile. So a novel entitled Chilean Poet by one of the most promising young writers from that country, that's going to appeal to anyone, I think, who likes reading. And the category that I want to explore is Saramago books. José Saramago was an amazing writer. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature. He's the only writer, the only Portuguese language writer to have ever won that award, which I think it's not fair, not because he did deserve it, but because there are so many good writers in Portugal and in Brazil and in other Portuguese-speaking countries, and there have been for so long that it's amazing that he's the only one today to have won it. Anyway, I've read a lot of his famous novels. I want to read everything he ever wrote, so I am starting with the famous novels, the most acclaimed novels that I haven't read. So it makes sense to choose The History of the Siege of Lisbon this month. I know very little about this novel, but I assume it is a historical novel from the title, so I expect something like Baltasar and Blimunda, which in Portuguese, of course, is Memorial do Convento, which is one of his most famous novels, and I loved it. I've read it twice, I think, and it is not his easiest work. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it as a starting point. I don't know. If you like historical novels, it is amazing. So I'm expecting something similar, but we'll see. As for English classics, in April I want to read Frankenstein. It's going to be a reread because I've read Frankenstein at least twice. It is a novel that I read at university, but I made a list of classics that I want to get through from America and from England, and, you know, English language classics. When I say English classics, I'm actually referring to the language, not the nationality. And so I've made this list, and Frankenstein was on it, and I haven't read it in quite a while, even though I've reviewed it in this channel. And I want to reread it because I'm going to make a confession to you. I've never really been a fan of Frankenstein. And I don't know if I'm being unfair to the novel, so I'm going to reread it and I'll let you know if my thoughts, if my feelings about it have changed with time. So in this list of classics that I've made, Frankenstein was there, but there are lots of novels, lots of English classics and American classics that I haven't read. But I don't mind. I'll reread the ones that I've read before, and I will read and discover new classics. And I hope that by sharing what classics I'm going to be reading month by month on my TBRs, that some of you will join me and perhaps discover, that's not a word, discover or rediscover some of them along with me. And of course, In Search of Lost Time. At the time of filming this, I'm still reading volume 3, which is The Way of Guermantes, and I'm enjoying it a lot. I don't know if I'll be able to finish it before April begins, but I would love to finish it, and that's my hope, and I hope I'll be able to start the 4th volume in April. The 4th volume is Sodom and Gomorrah. It is really hard to talk about In Search of Lost Time when you haven't read the whole thing, because I think the whole thing comes together at the end. So I think from now on I'm going to speak very little about it. I'm just going to let you know where I'm at with it, which volume I have read, which volume I'm reading at the time, but I'm not really going to go into it much. Read it. I mean, everybody needs to read Proust. Everybody needs to have an opinion on whether they like his writing or not and why, but you need to experience that for yourself. Nobody else can do that for you. That's how I feel about Proust right now. And I'm saying all of this and it sounds like I'm saying it to you, but I'm actually saying it to myself to keep motivated reading this novel because, you know, it is not the easiest thing in the world. It's not a difficult novel. I also want to convey that. But it is hard work, long sentences, slow pace, virtually not plot, no plot, but it is amazing. And I just don't have the words to explain it yet, to explain why yet, but I'm hoping that once I've read the whole thing, I'll be able to sit here on this couch or somewhere else, maybe stand up even, and tell you all about it.